So we just went and saw It 2.
This is the sequel to the first It movie that rebooted the movie. This is the second part of the new rebooted movie It that kind of tells the story of the Losers Club from Derry, Maine. But in the first movie, they were kids. Now in the second movie, they're grown up and adults, and now they have to take out the killer clown Pennywise.
Before we get into spoilers, let's give them our score, right?
Oh, yeah. Before we get into spoilers, let's talk about what I would rate it. I know my last movie I spilled the beans on was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I kind of gave that an 8. I was saying in the car that I thought this was an 8, but I think I might drop it to a 7.5. Brian's going to bring up some good, interesting points later, but for sequels go, I thought it was pretty good. Overall, it wasn't a bad movie. There were just some parts. When you go to see the movie, you'll notice it's almost 3 hours long, and they try to jam as much exposition about this as they can, and then the choices they make with the relationships of the people, not their adults, kind of dropped it a couple points for me. So yeah, I'm going to give this a 7.5.
For me, I'm going to give it about a 4 out of 10, which is such a low score. I don't think we've had anything low like that on Grandmaster Spills Beans.
Yeah.
And with that being said, we will get into spoilers.
Spoiler territory, so let's go. So right away, the beginning of the movie takes place when now the Loser Club, they're all grown up. I can't name all the actors and actresses off the top of my head, but you had Jessica Chastain playing Adult Bev. I'm blanking on his name, but Professor Xavier from the new X-Men movies. He was Billy grown up, the one with the stutter, who lost his brother Georgie. And then I thought the other people who were casted were really good. As the adults, they even brought back an actor who kind of looked like old, was it Billy Myers? Or Billy... It's not Billy.
Yeah, like all the actors like really look like the younger versions of the Losers. It was actually pretty cool how they did that.
Mm-hmm. But in this case, Pennywise is doing the same damn thing, abducting kids. In the beginning of the movie, it shows these two gay guys getting beat up by a couple homophobes in Maine, and Pennywise eats one of the gay guys who gets thrown off a bridge, which I didn't get, but maybe he just needs souls or something.
Yeah.
So
It seemed like he just needed to get a jump start on his energy or whatever, you know what I mean? Because the guy was in fear for his life already, so he's like, oh, good, easy prey, might as well get some free energy.
The boy who's the African-American of the group, he grows up and he never left Maine, so he can remember everything that happens. Mike, there you go. Mike, who was the butcher's kid who his family got burned in the fire. So he basically tells the gang that they need to come back. So they all meet up, but then it turns out one of them doesn't show up. He kills himself because he's not a man enough to take on this beast. He's too afraid. And then all of a sudden things start going crazy for the Losers Club. And essentially Mike tells them there's a way to take out the killer clown.
Yeah.
They have to perform a ritual that Native Americans tried to perform on this entity, It, a long time ago, but never did successfully. So Mike convinces Billy to help convince the group that they need to work together. And the one thing that they have to do is basically rehash the first story, and they have to go back to these places where they can find totems, little memories, artifacts of what happened from some of them. So they find these things, bring them to the about 5,000 feet below Derry, find Pennywise's cave, and then try to take him out.
So this for me is where the story got really redundant. It seemed like literally the first movie was told again just with older characters, you know, this entity, It, right? It's scaring the crap out of these people, and they've beat it before. They know how it's done. I mean, supposedly their memories kinda is jarred from leaving Derry, like Joe said. But when they come back into it, you'd think that they'd know what they were doing because they've done it before and they're all familiar with their stories and they're all regaining their memories and things like that. It was literally the same thing to me. They were facing their fears, which is great. That's exactly what you need to do, is face your fears and bond with people, bond with your friends to overcome these challenges, right? But it was the same story twice, I felt like.
But then in the end, they take on Pennywise, realize that if, just like the first one, that if they don't fear him, if they get him to something that's sizable enough for them to take on, they can kill him. In the end, they basically rip out Pennywise's heart, and when they kill Pennywise, they kill the structure that he was in, the old decrepit haunted house that he haunted those kids in before, and it all goes away. And then once it goes away, it doesn't prove the city goes back to normal or anything. You still think it's the same weird city where the adults don't give a shit about what's going on with the kids and all this other stuff. But they really, towards the end, try to push this whole idea. Number one, that if you're friends for life. You'll never forget about each other, which we all know. Sometimes, we go years without speaking to our friends, but it's always nice to reconnect. And you shouldn't be afraid just because you're separated by distance or the time that you've been away.
I feel like maybe it's not as obvious as he's saying, because it is a 27-year distance, from when they were friends and from when they had their separate lives, you know what I mean? So while it may be easier for some people like us, like to have good friends and to come back, like a few months later, maybe a couple years later, we haven't gone that amount of distance in time and then try to reconnect, who knows? And I'm sure for a lot of people growing up now, where there's a lot more connections to be made, like over the internet, you know what I mean? And it's like maybe the connections aren't as strong.
For me, in a lot of the flashback scenes, the kids always kept bringing up, will we be friends when we're our parents' age? Will we be friends when we're grown up? And all the kids keep reassuring to themselves, like, no, we'll always be friends. We'll always have each other. And it really kind of took this tragedy and the promise, the blood pact that they made for them to come back and really realize that every single one was important to each other. For people like Bev and Ben, they were always in love, and they just didn't know it. Ben knew it, but Bev didn't. So this was kind of their way for kind of rekindling that friendship that sparks, for some people, love. But the second thing that I thought was kind of repeated through this movie, especially towards the end, was you have to be yourself. If you always saw yourself as a loser, like Stanley did when he was with them, he even during his bar mitzvah, which is a very big thing, he said, I don't think this one ceremony is going to change who I am. If I feel that I'm this, then I'm this, and that's my identity. And then you turn out Richie, towards the end of the movie, was gay, or maybe had kind of a gay crush on, I forgot his name, who died towards the end. Eddie. So you kind of realize that Richie had a thing for Eddie. That's why he always picked on him and always talked about fucking his mom and stuff like that. You realize Bev was always yearning for that love and that letter that Ben wrote for her. And then you realize that Billy was not the reason why his little brother was killed. So all these things come together, and you realize that they always saw themselves as one thing but didn't want to acknowledge it. But sometimes you have to be who you are and know who you are. So I took that away from this movie. It kind of made me feel good towards the end, but in the end, it was an interesting horror movie. The clown was pretty cool. I laughed during the whole everyone who died from the killer clown. I laughed at.
Yeah, it had some good comedy moments in there, and then it had some like moments that were supposed to be funny that weren't.
I mean, if I could take someone like the genie from Aladdin and mix it with like Pennywise the clown in terms of how like demented it could be, but how funny he could be from like the genie, like that would be my perfect like best friend, like someone who could just shapeshift at all these terrifying things that just made me laugh.
What the hell?
But if someone who saw the original 2-part TV series, had to compare these two movies, which totals like 5 hours, compared to the TV series, which was like 3 max, I'd say they took some things that were really good from the TV show, made them better, but also I think they kind of put their own spin on it, especially with this one being 3 hours. Buckle yourselves in. Make sure to go to the bathroom before the movie starts. Make sure to get all your food, because you don't want to miss too much of it, even though there are some parts that drag. But like I said, I gave it a 7.5, which I think is generous, but I overall liked it. Brian gave it a 4. But what do you guys think? If you've seen the movie already, make sure to comment below so we can read your comments and have an online discussion. If not, I say go see It 2. It's worth the money. We saw it in IMAX, and at least it got a couple good scares. There were some people who were crying on the way out.
Yeah,
So
literally. I mean,
if you are afraid of clowns, do not go see this movie, even if your friend tries to convince you.